Good morning, Philip. Welcome. Welcome, everybody, to this lovely session. Welcome, Frank, Kirsten, Patrick, Reisa, Rula. Oh, it's going fast now. Hey, Annegreet.
Hello, Frank.
Good morning. Manouk is here. Natasha. Welcome, everybody.
Morning.
Hey, Thomas. So for everybody who just joined, welcome. We're going to start in about 3 minutes. If you will, please share in chat your name, your role, maybe where you're dialing in from. And if you have one, please also share your main challenge you might have with AI. We will be recording this session, so if you don't want to be in the recording, please turn off your cameras. But I would really, really appreciate it if you at least would participate in chat. We need that to make this one a success. So let's see who's all here, and maybe you can indeed introduce yourself a little bit. Who else joined? Carolina, Joost, welcome. A person called iPhone is here. Super interesting. Hey, Natasha, thank you. Independent talent advisor. Hey, Cape Town, very good. Dieter, this must be one of your acquaintances. Very good, welcome.
Thank you.
Kevin is here. Welcome, Kevin. Sabrina just joined. So we'll give it a couple more minutes to before we really get started. Hey, Bilda, welcome. Claire is here. Just curiosity from Claire, very good. Hello from Berlin, from Rula. Lovely to see everybody. So we'll give it approximately 1 more minute before we really get started and kick this session off. I think we have a lot of participants already joining, so that's super good. And like I said earlier, for the people who just joined, if you will, please share in chat your name and role, where you're dialing in from, and maybe your main challenge that you have with AI. Super curious to hear and read that. I see some people connecting in chat, very good. Thank you. Dialing in from Gouda, lovely.
Hello, Claire.
Some acquaintances from France, very good. All right, I see it's 11:03, so I would say let's get this show on the road. Let's get started so that we make the most of this time. Welcome, everybody. Today, we have the pleasure of taking you into the beautiful world of AI and HR. Like I said earlier, this session will be recorded. So for everybody who doesn't want to be seen on camera, please turn them off. That being said, let's get started. We have a full agenda for today. We're going to first talk about how AI is reshaping the role of HR. We're going to see which skills are needed for HR professionals to lead in an AI-powered organization. And of course, it's not just about skills. We also need to think about how we can help people adopt AI more. So we're going to talk about the barriers to AI adoptions and hopefully also some solutions to overcome them. And lastly, we're going to see how HR can become a trusted guide for AI adoption across the business. So that's the plan. I am hoping this will be a very interactive webinar. That means that if at any point you have a question, feel free to ask them, preferably not via chat, but via the link that we will share in chat, which is also here on top. Because if you share it there, you can also vote on each other's questions. So that we can make sure that by the end of this session, we answer all the most important questions. That being said, a little bit about Lapaya. Basically, what we see is that the world is changing. It's changing rapidly and more faster than ever. And the ability to adapt to all that change has become essential. And at Lapaya, we try to empower individuals to stay ahead of that change by fostering the skills needed to navigate that evolving landscape. And our mission is basically to support professionals in developing themselves and making sure they stay on top of things, embrace that change, help them do that with confidence. And we aim to do this by delivering engaging and AI-powered learning programs that drive measurable behavior change. And we don't just want to, change any skill. It needs to be a skill that is directly involved with strategic business objectives. So we want to ensure basically that personal growth goes hand in hand into organizational impact. That being said about Lapaya, of course, we have a very talented team of speakers here, well, at least two of them, Florence and Dr. Dieter Veldman. My name is Ian Strick, and I am an AI ambassador at Lapaya, and I'm responsible for learning impact. And that's basically the story that I just told you, helping organization change in a meaningful way that helps the organizational goals. At Lapaya, I build AI solutions. I help enable AI within the business, but also in our learning programs. So that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. And I'm elated to also have a conversation today with Florence. Florence, will you maybe introduce yourself shortly?
Sure. So good morning, everybody. I am Florence Noni. I am a seasoned HR director with around 28 years of experience. And during my life, I always promoted the HR function as strategic and business partner. And I'm very proud to participate to this webinar today. And as you know, I am very fond with technology and AI. So it's a pleasure to be there.
Great. Thank you. How about you, Mr. Dr. Dieter Veldman?
So good day, everyone. It's really fantastic to join you. My name is Dr. Dieter Veldman. I'm the Chief HR Scientist at the Academy to Innovate HR, working with our global clients specifically on how do they embrace the challenges of the future of work within the context of the HR function, of which we'll talk a lot more about today in terms of AI being one of the key drivers in terms of what the future will hold. From a background point of view, I'm an ex-Chief HR Officer. I am also kind of out of the organizational design or development world at a particular point in time, and currently I lead the thought leadership and insights part of the AI HR business. So really looking forward to our conversation.
Very good. Well, thank you both. And before we really kick it off, I'm actually very curious what the audience think, because of course we will hear a lot about AI and AI is changing the world, etc., etc. But I'm interested to hear from the people from the poll here how you would describe your organizational current approach to AI. Is that maybe you think you're already very mature on the topic, you might be exploring and piloting stuff, or maybe you're just using a few tools with limited strategy. So please let us know in the poll. And I am very curious to hear from you to see where you currently stand. And I see some answers already coming in, and in a second we should be able to see all of the answers. All right, there we go. So most of you, 46% of you are actively exploring and piloting tools already. So that's super good to hear. Some of you are using a few tools, but with limited strategy, and 11% is interested but haven't started yet. So that's a very good kickoff point for today, of course, because today we're going to talk about how you can take those first steps as well. And of course, the overview of what's happening around AI is a lot. So it really is changing the way we work and the skills that we need for that. And it holds a lot of promises. And of course, on the one hand, you might say that there are already 78% of organizations that are using AI in at least one business functions, according to McKinsey. But on the other hand, only 40% of them have been able to really scale that. And on that same note, only 25% of AI initiatives are having the return on investment that companies are hoping for. And even less, only 15% of employees said that they have a very clear strategy around AI. So on the one hand, there's a lot of hype and there's a lot of things going on, but on the other hand, it's very difficult to capture on that value. But it does hold a couple of promises. So it should increase productivity, it should increase our capabilities, it's something that's accessible for everyone, but at the same time, it's also difficult to really make that worth our while. So let's start with that first question, because I'm super curious, Dieter, how you see that. So how do you think AI is reshaping the role of HR? Where is it already creating value, in your opinion? Can you shed some light on that?
Ian, I think maybe to split the question into two different parts, right? And I'm going to kickstart with what is the role of HR in AI? And I think you've summed it up beautifully at the beginning to say that there's a lot of noise. And I think that there's a lot also happening at the moment of organizations trying to make sense of what does AI really mean for them. So I think HR has fundamentally got two roles when we start looking at the current context. The first role is HR's role in how do we guide the organization to transform into an AI-driven organization, or at least to interpret and make sense of what is this disruption going to mean for us. There's a lot of research coming out at the moment that the organizations that are leading in this field have multidisciplinary cross-functional teams looking at AI adoption. I think the moment it becomes a technology-only conversation, I think you're in trouble, because as much as we all know sitting around the table today, there's a lot more related to the skills, how we're going to apply it, the change, the mindsets that also need to happen within the organization. So I think your first role is very much around how do we guide the organization, get the right people talking about the right things in what does AI mean for our business, how does that fit with our business strategy and what we want to achieve in our context and the changes that we would need to make. I think the second role there is also then very much around what does AI mean for us as HR? And I know there's varying views about that, but ever since the 1990s, we've been promising business this contribution of strategic partnership. And, we've been talking a lot about first automation and then, straight through processing and all those types of things over the years. But I think we are only now at a real point in time where we have the technologies available that are smart enough that can really elevate what we do and what our contribution to the organization is. So I think secondly, in our role is to understand what does that mean for us and how will our operating models, our ways of work, our practices change in future, and where does that fit with what we do today? And how do we start preparing our HR teams with the skill sets required to really responsibly and sustainably adopt AI? I want to shift that a little bit, Ian, to the second part of your question and say if we have these two roles, it's helpful for me to think about the value that AI provides to us in terms of three different levels. Because at the moment, I have a little bit of a pet gripe. Everybody talks about AI adoption, and then my follow-up question is, what does adoption mean for you? Buying licenses on its own is not a strategy. Playing with tools is not a strategy. That's not organization level adoption. So I think it's helpful to think about it at three levels. There's definitely the individual level of AI use, right? And that's very much geared towards our individual levels of productivity that we want to drive. People using it for things like analyzing data, writing communications, creating content. So think very much here around the tool sets, regardless of which one you utilize, and you're using it in your day-to-day capacity. There's a second piece there, and that's what you mentioned, where companies are struggling to shift to, which is how do we use it at a process and a practice level? So how do we start utilizing AI as part of our ways of work that goes beyond just the individual use cases that we find with individuals utilizing these tools? I think that's also where interesting use cases are starting to emerge around, how do we use different AI agents to run certain processes, make end-to-end decisions. And then I think where we want to strive to get to over time is the enterprise level, where we start looking at what does that really mean within the organization? How does that transform our workforce? But that's going to take time to get there. It's like with any new technology, and I know the speed and the pace has been slightly different with generative AI specifically, but we typically will go through that curve where all the hype, all the excitement, we realize what it means for us, and then we start building the foundations in terms of what it's going to look like for us in the long term. So to summarize for me, that's two roles. How do we guide the organization, help the transformation? What does that mean for ourselves? And when we think about adoption, for me, the three different levels, it's just useful to think about it in that way because it delivers different value to the organization.
Yeah. Super interesting. And something that also stuck with me, what you said is we shouldn't only let tech do it, right? It's more than just a tech solution. It's something that we, especially within HR, are and need to be involved in because it touches humans, right? It touches a lot of our people, actually. So that's already reason enough maybe to invest in it and to upskill. And of course, it's interesting, the 3 levels that you mentioned. I know, Florence, we've talked about this a little bit already. You've had some very practical examples as well of basically implementing AI in different processes, I imagine, within HR. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, sure. But first of all, I fully agree with Dieter. And I attended a recent conference with Diane that is attending the meeting today. And in this conference, HR were mentioning that we're on the bottom of the list when it comes to receiving budget to create use cases for HR. So it's often a reality, but it should not prevent HR from adopting AI by themselves, learning how to prompt and to use a free version of Copilot or ChatGPT, respecting rules of confidentiality, of course. So they should be a role model in AI adoption and not wait for nice budget to do so. And secondly, when it comes to recruitment, I think, yes, we can take advantage of using AI in recruitment, but we need also to be extremely careful with the limitation. And I wanted to share with you an example with my experience where I wanted to create a selection with AI, and on the top 10 candidates, one grade was missing. And I gave the CV to ChatGPT or to Copilot to say, okay, we have an excellent CV. Why it's not on the top 10 list? And Copilot answered to me, yes, you're right. So I wanted to point out that we need to continue to stay with a human judgment and not to prevent hiring decision without being fully involved in the recruitment process. And you know, all the bias that we may have with the different tools. When it comes to chatbots, I think it's very useful because, as you know, even you have nice answer in the portal, the people are asking HR, what about my vacation days? What about the maternity leave? And some very transactional questions. And for sure, with a chatbot, it will be very useful to avoid that and to make sure HR people will focus on very strategic and less time-consuming tasks. And the last experience I wanted to share with you is what I worked with Laurent Cousseau, who is attending in the room here. We wanted to build a framework of competencies. And we say, okay, we need to use a Copilot to work on it. And it was very useful to build the first competencies when it comes to traditional roles, functional roles, a financial controller or accounting department. But when it comes to very technical jobs, it was not very useful. So it's why we change our mind and we say, okay, we will focus on job description. And then with 10 big examples of big roles, we will build some competencies and start with a framework and then use this framework for other roles. And then Copilot will be useful to match the job description with our competency model. And it was extremely brilliant performance. And we were able to map 150 roles. So it was very great. So my point is we need to use and to think about the use case, but also by test and learn methods to make sure it will be appropriate.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned something super important here. There's a lot of talk also about AI replacing humans, but actually what you said is that it's so important to keep that human in the loop, keep that human in the process to say, hey, well, you're actually missing a resume in this case. And also the other 2 examples are, I think very practical, right? Building a chatbot for something like answering questions on the policy of the company, or in this case, even building the company competency profile, but only after you've tested it yourself. And I think maybe that's a good bridge to the next question, because you can't just start. You need a little bit of skills probably to be able to work with these tools. And I see in our questions at the top that there are already some questions on skills coming in. So please, if you have a question yourself, add them here through the link, and we'll make sure to also put it in chat. So if you want us to answer any of your questions, put that in, please. But like I said, we need a little bit of skills to work confidently with AI. So maybe my question to you as well, Florence, is what kind of skills do you see HR professionals that they need that to confidently, work in an, or lead even in an AI-powered organization?
Very specific to AI, I will say, okay, very standard question, so competencies like curiosity, discipline, and willingness to learn. For me, there are the three main competencies, and I will put the stress on curiosity, of course, but discipline is important too, because discipline, it's easy to start, but if you need to progress, you need to dedicate each week sometimes to learn how to prompt, how to work with all these nice tools. So discipline is very important, and willingness to learn is key too. I wanted also to put the stress on a Danish study then explaining that women are 16 to 20% less likely than men to work with ChatGPT, even when holding the same job or performing similar roles. And as you know, HR function is very women-oriented, with 70% of the population around women in HR. So I think it's more than important for HR professional to take the role of AI and to involve and they dictate time themselves.
Wow. And was it 16 or 60, Florence?
16 to 20% less likely than men to use ChatGPT, even on the same position.
Wow. Well, that's still a massive, massive difference, of course. So very good that you pointed that one out. And in terms of skills, curiosity, openness to learn, growth mindset, all super important, and discipline. I love that you added that to it. Dieter, what do you think about this question? What skills do you see that are needed in the workplace, especially within HR?
Yeah, I think very much to build on what Florence has also mentioned. I mean, I fundamentally believe that curiosity is crucially important for anything in life, right? And I think at the moment things are moving so quickly that for people to remain inquisitive and curious about is changing is definitely going to be an important factor for the future. I think for me there's almost a blend when we talk about AI fluency or AI skills. There's a couple of things to note. I think the first one is that similar to 30 years ago, and maybe I'm also giving away my age a little bit there, when we started moving into everybody utilizing computers and the intranet and things at work, there were certain base computer proficiency skills that we said, what, everybody needs to have that. So to make it super, super practical, in Excel, everybody needs to know what a row and a column is, and there's basic calculations that you do need to be able to do. But we also know for certain roles, much more advanced technical skills also come to the fore around complex formulas, automations that we need to be able to build within Excel as well. And I think if we follow the same logic in terms of building AI fluency, there's definitely going to be different levels of skill set required. And I think that's important to say that because it helps people know what a starting point is going to look like. Excuse me. So I think there will be a baseline AI fluency proficiency that everybody is going to require and going to need. And I call it AI fluency and not AI skills because I think it is like learning a new language, right? It's learning a language pertaining to how do we engage with these tool sets as part of our workflows and our workforce going forward. And I think at that baseline level, there's a balance between behavioral skills like Florence has mentioned, and I think more technical skills. On the technical side, I think it is things like AI awareness, knowing what the tools can and can't do. I think there's an ethical component there around how do I adopt it ethically and put the right controls in place. There's a very practical component there around prompt engineering. How do I engage with these tools? What does a good prompt look like? What does a chain of prompts look like in order to be able to get to the right area there? I think there's a piece there also around how do I champion the adoption of AI within my organization? And then at a much more advanced level, I think that's where we get to the skill sets around configuring large language models, thinking a lot more about data security, etc. as part of that. So I think it's important to first go and define when we are talking about AI skills, what exactly are we talking about? For who, in which context? Because I think let's talk HR for a moment. All HR professionals will require a basic proficiency in AI fluency to be able to do their roles well. Depending on your context and depending on your role, I think you might need deeper seated expertise over time in terms of how you ingrain that. I think about my earlier triangle of individual, team, and enterprise level. And, for me, it's really then important that that's kind of the differentiation that we make to get to something that makes sense and is practical.
And if you were to, provide some tips for people here who are in that process of starting on their journey on AI within HR, what are maybe the 3 things that they need to do first? Is that something you could answer?
Yeah, I'll give you 4, right? So maybe I'll do
4,
3 and then a bonus one. So I think the first one is a little bit of what we're doing today, right? Is educate yourself around what AI is and what AI is not. I think at the moment there's a lot of things masquerading as AI that's not there. And, I think Hollywood has also informed a certain perception that we have about, oh, AI, the robots are coming, that is actually not true. So, I have questions that I still get from a lot of our clients when I speak to them on, I've downloaded an AI app. Can it now absolutely access everything I have, even in private folders that it's never had access to? So go out, educate yourself. What is AI? What can it do? What can't it do? And I think that's the really, first important point, and deal with the fear that you have around it. It's a good thing, but we need to use it in a responsible way. I think the second piece is around equipping. So make sure that you do get the exposure. And all our data tells us that AI is one of those things that you learn by playing with the tools. So I love the fact that earlier people said they're already experimenting with some of the tool sets. Play with them and see what they can and what they cannot do. And then I think there's a component there around making sure that you expose yourself to structured experiments and how other people are also utilizing it. So being able to learn from others and seeing what other use cases are out there. And then I think my bonus one is the elevate piece. So once you've kind of, equipped yourself, you've started playing with it and getting some of your own use cases, elevate that further and say, beyond my own workflow and the things I do day to day, how can I use this when I work with others? And that's kind of that transition, I think, into that next step. But it starts with basic education, right? Know what we are talking about, stay up to date, get some basic skill sets, practice it, explore it in a safe environment, and then from there, start scaling it in your daily use.
Yeah, super interesting. Thank you for that. And I guess the skills are only part of the question ultimately, right? So you have a couple of skills, you know what to do, but as HR, we're probably also responsible for developing our people and helping other people to adopt it. And that's not always easy. I mean, any change, of course, is difficult. In general, people resist that. So I'm very eager to hear from the audience as well what they see as the biggest barrier to AI adoption in their, specific companies. Is it lack of knowledge? Is it budget? Is it fear of change, the one that I mentioned? Or is it maybe buy-in from leadership or other colleagues? Or is it just you don't know where to start and you don't know where it could potentially add value in your particular role? Or maybe you have a total different idea. I'm really hoping to hear from you, and then ultimately I also want to hear from you, Dr. Dieter and Florence. So let's see what the audience say. If you haven't answered the poll yet, please do so now. Then we can take your answer into consideration. All right, let's see what people think here. Oh, there's a very mixed message here. So I think the biggest group says that it's actually unclear what are the use cases. So I think that's super important also for us to help them understand, and we're already doing that. And then there's a very big group, about 1/3, that says, yeah, well, we just have a lack of training and knowledge on the topic. So again, very well positioned to be here in this webinar, obviously. There's a little bit of lack of leadership buy-in, fear of change, resistance, budgets. So actually, all of these that we've mentioned are well, in more or less fashion there for people. So maybe Dieter, you already started a little bit here. What are in your opinion, the real barriers to AI adoption? Do you recognize what we see in the audience here?
Yeah, I think definitely, similar to how the audience has voted, and I see Carolina had made a really good point in the chat as well in terms of, organizations jumped onto AI pretty quickly. So what happened in the boardroom, I think everybody was asking this question around, but what are we doing about AI? We are going to be left behind. Now, a couple of months down the line, we're asking this question, but okay, we're adopting AI, but for what purpose? So there's not clarity necessarily on, just adopting AI for AI's sake. So I think there's a real unclarity around what are the real use cases that's going to deliver value. something I always talk about is, some things are interesting and fun to do, but they're not necessarily that helpful or that useful or that impactful. And I think to be able to differentiate against those. Something that we are also seeing, and it was quite interesting, it was also mentioned by the audience, is sometimes leadership buying into what this really is. So I think people are also coming to grips with it in terms of their own experience and exposure to it. And I think it's very difficult from a leadership point of view to say this is where it fits for us as an organization in such a fast moving field. So I think the narrative is not necessarily owned by a lot of leaders in their organization on this is how we are going to approach it. We don't have all the answers yet, but our first experiments are going to be in area A, B, and C. And that's kind of where we will make sure, that we focus on. I think there's still some real concerns around things like privacy, data, tool sets. What can I use? What can't I use? A lot of organizations now have progressed, which I think is a really positive thing around at least providing guidelines to their people on general AI use so that people can also feel safe when utilizing these tool sets and what they have access to and what they use and what data they utilize to train themselves on there. And then I think there is a reality that we are in a tight economic environment that is also I think impacted by a lot of global events at the moment. So there's not necessarily budget lying around just to utilize for AI experimentation. So in a lot of organizations, it is about how do I redistribute and reallocate some of the budget and what am I going to spend on? And being aware that, as I said earlier, and maybe I sound like a broken record player, but buying licenses is not the strategy. That's one of the things that we do need to do. It's about where does that fit and how are we going to link that to real business value. So if that helps you, and those are the type of ones that we see and hear a bit.
I think so, and that's super insightful. It's more of it's a combination of things, as most things are, obviously. Florence, what do you think about this? Can you shed some light in your experience what the barriers are, and also how can we overcome them, maybe?
Yeah, because Dieter is very talkative and with a lot of concept. What I can add is maybe two ideas. First idea is it's important to recognize that the adoption of Gen AI must be driven from the very top. The CEO, the executive committee, they are primarily responsible for setting the vision, the ambition, and the narrative for AI transformation in the company. So the first role of the CHRO is to secure this point. And so it's maybe the first role. The second idea is don't wait for the perfect tool. A very common mistake in the organization is to say, okay, I will wait for the very best AI solution before acting. So we have everyday new version, everyday new options, new tools, but don't wait the perfect tool. We risk missing the momentum, and the risk is also to leave our teams behind. So my point is start now, even with the tools available. It's not perfect, but you will encourage experimentation and learning. So test and learn. And early adoption, it's certainly important to make sure employees will become familiar and to identify relevant use cases and build a culture of innovation and agility. So not seek perfection, but foster progress and engagement across the organization.
Yeah, super good, super interesting. And I see some very interesting mentions in the chat as well. I think Hassan is saying a key area about expectation management, that we don't, from day one immediately expect, the gold to appear, right? It's something that needs to develop. It's something that takes a little bit of time to do. And I love your point, Florence, as well, that we need to do it top down. So if you're in the C-suite, you're a CHRO, make sure you get yourself involved into this conversation and help drive the adoption of AI downstream, basically. And don't wait, just start now and see, experiment with it, see how it can help you. Looking at the time, we have 10 minutes left, so I really want to go into some questions from the audience, because I saw some very interesting one in the tool that we have. So if you still want to add a question there, please do that via the link that you'll see in chat in a second. And I also see that there are some questions that are upvoted. So for instance, this first one is from an anonymous person asking, what are the skills due to AI you see in general that employees should be should be developed to be able to work with AI, for instance, agents, or create AI solutions to make their own work more efficiently. Florence or Dieter, any one of you want to take this one on?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in there, and then Florence, maybe I hand it to you after that. So, I think without getting into too much detail around, skills taxonomies, for me personally, 4 things. I think the first one is AI tool literacy. So what are the tools? How do I utilize them? What is available in our environment, and know what to use them for? Because not all AI is created equal. They've got different strengths and the limitations. I think the second one there is the practicality of when I work with these things, like prompt engineering. How does that work? How do I phrase? How do I prompt? How do I mature that over time? For me, there is the critical and ethical use. So where do I go and apply it, and knowing how I insert it into my workflow. And when I say ethical use, obviously there's the things we talk about in terms of bias, etc. But there's also the other side there in terms of where should I use it and where should I not use it. There's a lot of use cases coming out where people used it in processes where it does not add value and it actually detracts. So I think that's an important piece to be able to know there. And then, just something we call human AI collaboration. That's a skill to understand how to work with these type of technologies. So in short, know what it is you're getting, know what is available, know where to use it, and know where to use it responsibly. And I think if you can just ingrain those skill sets into people, they will figure out a lot of the rest of the things themselves.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting, right? So first check which tools do we have available in our specific situation, because not every company has ChatGPT, and of course there are some basic skills on how to ask the right questions, right? The prompt engineering that you mentioned. And maybe one thing that I like to add here, you said ethical use. It's about, okay, when to use it, when don't use it. And I think that's super important here, that you decide, okay, yeah, in some cases you might not want to use AI. Do you really want to use AI to create a goodbye letter for the person you worked with for 20 years? I mean, I'm not saying you should or you shouldn't, but think about it at least before you decide on that front. And I love that human AI connection piece as well. I see some other questions coming in as saying, let's see. So today everyone is talking about AI, but it feels like AI strategy never really sticks because everyone is actually scared of AI. How can HR take a role in leading the change and making the personnel less scared of change? Maybe Florence, you want to take this one?
But yeah, it's true that even some technical people, like design people, are very scared by using AI because they are fearing to lose their job. So it's quite normal. And sometimes you think they are technical and they should be very adverted to AI, but it's very depending of the orientation. So sometimes people are young and you believe they will adapt very easily, and on the contrary they are quite old and in fact they are adopting very quickly. So it's not a question of age and even of function, it's more a question of understanding to which extent it will change their job, to which extent it can create added value to their job. So for me, they need to understand that some tasks will disappear, it's true, but some other will be saved, and they should understand that they can treat AI as an assistant and as a super elevator, a super, we can say, augmented person to work with them. So it's the question of explaining by example the way it will change completely their task and the way they will recreate a new way to do their job.
I can add to that, Ian, maybe a quick note if helpful. I think there's 2 things exactly to what Florence has mentioned that I would add. I think the other one is HR needs to take a leading role in setting up the structure so we have a robust cross-functional conversation around AI. So I think that's where, what governance task teams do we have in place that's actually exploring the topic. I think if we don't step up there and make sure that it is a cross-functional one, this becomes a technology-led conversation. And then I think the other component there is own the narrative. So we do need to have a very strong role in what is the narrative about our company when we talk about AI internally and our approach towards that. And some of that will be clear cut, what do we use, what don't we use? But other things there is also around how do we believe AI will be integrated into our workforce in the future? How do we think about the role that AI will play in our business in the longer term? It's not just for HR to craft those things, but I think we play a key role in bringing the right parties together so that they're paid attention to.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a very good addition. Thank you for that. And it's not an easy answer. Maybe one thing that I can add from my experience, also helping people adopt AI, is that yes, there are some people that are scared of AI, but it's not everybody, right? And so basically, you could sort of think about, okay, what are the different personas within my organization that maybe there are some people who are already very enthusiastic and not scared of AI and going really hard. They need something different than the people who indeed are still a little bit scared and don't have a lot of experience. And think about, okay, which different personas could we see in our organization and how can we help them, each individually or as a persona group, to take the next steps. So yeah, that's maybe something to add here as well. Let's see. I am looking through the questions here. A question from Digital GV. And by the way, if you want to add something in words to your questions, feel free to unmute yourself and do that. But basically, the question is: in what ways can HR leverage AI-driven insights and automation to create truly personalized employee experience, such as tailored learning, career development, and well-being initiatives, while safeguarding privacy, transparency, and ethical standards in the use of sensitive workforce data? This is a hot topic. This is one of the reasons why we say, okay, ethical AI is very important, data is important, but what can and should and would we not use it for? Take it away, someone who has an opinion on this one. Dr. Dieter, I see you smiling already. Go ahead, take it.
So I think maybe to answer this one, I'll focus on two of the use cases there, right, that I've already seen organizations use and that I think is worthwhile exploring. The first one, on the career development side, people are almost using AI as a bit of a career coach that guides the individual in gaining exposure and making certain decisions before they get to the conversation with their manager and mentor and formal coaching. So it's a process that then kind of the AI guides them through around, but what is your ambition? What are you focusing on? Where are you now? What is important for you in your career? And utilizing data to also make good recommendations and kind of guide that person through a bit of process of self-exploration. I think at the organizational level, that provides some interesting opportunities around how do we make people aware of the type of patterns of career progression that exist within our organization, and how can we start building skills frameworks aligned to that. The second use case on career development takes the skill set that the individual has and actually showcases to them what, with the skills they have, what other opportunities are available and what would developmental paths look like there. So it actually plots it out and maps it out by using skills transferability. A little bit more on the learning side, and that's also what we, for example, utilize it for, is, I think it's fantastic at learning recommendations to personalize in-time learning and to start changing, in the traditional world where we had these massive amounts of content, to stop people drowning in content, but actually promote to them what they need when they need it, aligned to certain parameters that the AI can start to understand when we start personalizing it in a particular context. I think there's great things in the well-being space. That one I think does become a lot more sensitive just due to the nature of the data that you utilize there. But there is some good diagnostic use cases that we're already starting to see there. And obviously the monitoring and tracking of habits that I think, not just in the HR space, but I think in very other domains have also kind of shown some great progress up to now. So my smile comes from the career development learning side, something I'm very passionate about, and it's awesome to see the progress that people are making there.
I think that's a some three super interesting actual use cases that you mentioned here. And I think here at Lapaya, we do sort of the same things. We use a lot of AI to help individuals see, hey, what is it actually that I need to learn? How can I develop myself further? And even within our learning programs, the same thing applies, right? Using AI can really help you really tailor it to the individual. So I think that's a lot of use cases here. On the side of the data and sensitive data work, so how to handle that, that's of course a different thing, and there are different laws and regulations that we all need to play with. The AI Act that is became active right now, the GDPR. So you need to find some solutions that are, if you work in Europe, that are hosted in Europe, for instance, if you want to apply to or adhere to the GDPR rules. So there are some things you need to do and think of that go beyond this webinar, unfortunately, to address. But that's super important. So thank you both for answering those questions. I think time flies when having fun, right? It's almost, or it's already 45 minutes. So maybe a like 10 seconds key takeaway, key tip, something that you can share with the audience before we need to wrap up. Want to go first, Florence?
Yeah, sure. So my first reaction, when it comes to learning and tailored learning, I wanted to say that yet you can, for the gaming, even with not too many budget, you can create a lot of very nice content and revisit your content, and maybe by creating very interactive solution for your employees. And on my key sentences or key takeaways will be, for the HR function, be naughty, take this AR as an excellent opportunity to put your hands on AI and to be like a role model. You have an excellent opportunity to develop yourself and to be an example, a role model for the rest of the company. So be naughty and get started.
Love it. Be naughty and get started. All right. How about you, Dieter?
I don't think I can top that, but maybe to keep it brief, I think from my side, sure, there's obstacles, but AI is a massive opportunity for step change in HR, and it's up to us on whether we're going to be courageous enough to embrace it.
Wow, that's super interesting. And thank you both for these perspectives. I think they are super useful. If you want to connect with the people here today, you can, of course, do that. Find us on LinkedIn. We will be sharing some of the materials afterwards. And I'm hoping this was useful for everybody. We would at least love to stay in touch. And I think in a second, you will also get a last question to see what you want to hear from next for our next webinar. I already want to take this time to thank our beloved speakers, Florence and Dr. Dieter Veldsman. Thank you for your interesting insights. I hope everybody has a great day afterwards, and feel free to contact us if you have any more questions. Thanks a lot. If you need to drop off, please do that. If you want to stick around for a bit, I'll be here for a couple of more minutes, so do that. And otherwise, have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye. I see still some people sticking around. Are there people with maybe some last questions I can help with? I can't promise that Florence or Dieter still have time, but I will be here for a couple more minutes if there are any questions from anybody. And we're such a small group now, so feel free to unmute yourself if there's anything. Maybe Dinali, Rajini, Himanshi, Jean-Marie. All right, then we are going to call it a day. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll talk later. Bye-bye.